Fashions of the aesthetic movement. A cult of beauty and Victorian counterculture. The aesthetic movement was a counterculture of artists and writers of mid-Victorian England who quietly rose against what they saw as the dehumanization of the industrial age. Aesthetic fashion cast off the stiffly tailored garments of Victorian style to embrace softer, more comfortable clothing based on historic costume of medieval times. The aesthetic viewed corsets and the rigidity of the day as attractive and artificial. It was, in essence, a fashion revolution. This cult of beauty, where fashion designers sought more natural styles and objected to mass production and the laws of industrial craftsmanship, may be compared to the hippie movements of the 1960s. Historical background of the aesthetic movement. London's Great Exposition of 1851 was an early form of the world's fairs that appeared until the middle of the 20th century. The Great Exposition featured aspects of the Industrial Revolution, highlighting steam power, industry, and mass production. A small group of artists, writers, and intellectuals in England believed that the laws of cottage industry and individually crafted goods would not benefit society. They saw the prime and proper Victorian society as rigid and obsession with a false respectability as foolish. As a result, the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, created by Dante Gabriel Rossetti, William Holman Hunt, and John Everett Millions, favored a less restrictive culture and railed on handcrafted goods and clothing based on the styles of the late Middle Ages. Medieval garments were simple, elegant, and beautiful. The fabric were colored with natural dyes. Beauty for the sake of beauty was their motto. Art was meant to be beautiful and not necessarily reflect political or moral attitudes. The paintings of Rossetti exemplify the look of the aesthetic movement. Models different from the feminine ideal of the day, the delicate, small featured prime and proper blonde. Women depicted in aesthetic art were tall and strong, featured with long flowing red or brunette hair. Instead of the stiff, formal portraiture of Victorian England, aesthetic portraiture depicted women in languid response with dreamy or sorrowful expression. The aesthetic movement in fashion. The pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood preferred the natural lines and clothing of medieval European costume and displayed those clothing designs in their art. The wives, daughters, and other women involved in the movement wore the medieval inspired garments at home and in the public. The look included several elements of an organic type of style. Aesthetic dress offered more freedom of movement than did the typical fashions of Victorian England. Instead of stiff bodices, the women wear long, flowing dresses with soft pleats, folds, and smoking. The aesthetics rejected the stiff corsets of the day. Dresses often featured a small chain. Sleeves were set at the normal shoulder edge in opposition to the Victorian dropped shoulder, which restricted arm movement. Sleeves were often puffed at the shoulder and gathered along the arm. Dresses offered few embellishments, unlike the heavily trimmed, ruffled, or braided edges often seen in the mid 19th century clothing. Some embroidery featured natural floral themes. The lily and sunflower were repeated motifs of the movement. Dyes were natural vegetable dyes. The aesthetic hated the new manufactured aniline dyes. Colors were muted, natural tones of brown, terracotta, russet red, cobalt or indigo blue, and sage or moss green. The Vetau bag dress featured a long pleat at the upper back that cascaded down to the floor, then caught up at the hemline. The tea gown, a popular garment that Victorian women wore when entertaining at home, was based on aesthetic style. Few accessories were worn. Jewelry was simple with amber as a popular element. Eastern inspired jewelry was popular as well. Icons of the aesthetic movement. Christina Rossetti, the sister of Dante Gabriel Rossetti, was a poet. She was painted by her brother with the loose, generous hair and flowing robes of aesthetics. Jane Morris, a muse and artistic model, was born into poor circumstances. Her work as a painter's model rose her social standing, and she eventually married William Morris. Jane was the polar opposite of Victorian feminine ideals in that she was poor, tall, and dark. Elizabeth Siddal was a millionaire who became an artist, model, and poet. Her long, elegant neck, large, expressive eyes, and abundance of red hair made her the quintessential aesthetic woman. John Ruskin was an art critic and social reformer who influenced the aesthetic movement. His lifelong interest in individual craftsmanship, social justice, and his opposition to the monotony and dehumanization of the industrial era, as well as his interest in mythology, informed the ideal of the movement. James Abbott Whistler's iconic painting, Symphony in White, has been called a modern allusion of the Virgin Mary as well as the allegorical picture of the loss of innocence. The model's bold gaze, her innocence with erotic undertones, the simple style and natural pose are all components of the aesthetic style. Whistler said of the painting that it was merely a painting of woman dressed in white standing in front of a white curtain, art for art's sake. William Morris. William Morris was an artist, textile designer, and founder of the arts and crafts movement. Morris felt a deep appreciation of the fine crafts that were individually produced in the late Middle Ages by skilled craftsmen. The textile mills of the mid 19th century, England destroyed the importance of skilled weavers, relying on poorly paid unskilled workers who toiled in often deplorable conditions. Morris objected to the use of the new allying dyes, which by mid-century replaced the old organic dyes that had been produced using vegetable matter and minerals. The new aniline dyes were, he felt, hideous and gaudy, while the older dyes faded to more subtle hues. Aniline dyed fabric changed into abominable hues. By the 1870s, it was difficult to obtain the older organic dyes, but his persistence led to a small, limited production of fabrics in the old methods. His firm employed the talents of skilled weavers and used organic dyes to produce beautiful, though expensive fabrics for fashion as well as for interior design. End of the aesthetic movement. The aesthetic movement was often parodied and ridiculed by the media. They made fun of the messy haired redheads so often portrayed in aesthetic art as well as the hedonistic cult of beauty so beloved of the moment. Several members of the group were criticized for their Catholic sympathies in a time when British society was anti Catholic. The Oxford movement, aligned with the pre-Raphaelites, believed that the Anglican Church was too secular and yearned for the return to the beautiful rituals of the past. The Christian Social Union angered certain segments of British society by calling for just wages and improved industrial working conditions. Like many radical movements, the ideal of the aesthetic moved toward the mainstream. Oscar Wilde went into a United States lecture tour speaking to urban sophisticates and cowboys alike on the cult of beauty. By the 1880s, the cult of beauty had gained momentum in popular culture, including a magazine devoted to the ideals of the movement, Dress James Miller magazine. The aesthetic movement was no longer a revolutionary concept but inspired fashion designers of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, including Martiano Fortuny, Paul Poiret, and led to Art Nouveau and the arts and crafts movement. Thank you.